shout out to Litsea and Southern Magnolia Candle and Soapery. Thanks so much for subscribing to my channel. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for regular uploads and your chance to be included in shoutouts for future videos. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I'll be making some more Lemon Myrtle Patchouli bars. I'm doing it a little bit different than I have in the past. So with my Lemon Myrtle and Patchouli, I reduced the Lemon Myrtle just by a little bit. I was doing 1.5, but I reduced it to 1%, and the reason why I did that was because I know I lose some, it flashes off a little bit, just a tiny bit, Lemon Myrtle, because it's not a base note, so it's a mid note, mid to top. But to keep it dermal safe, I reduce it to 1%, because max 1% dermal limit for Lemon Myrtle in soap and 0.7% in like balms and other stuff, because with candles and with balms and moisturizer and other products that you incorporate essential oils to, it's not really going to flash off as much as soap, because there's a reaction for 48 hours that happens in the mold, and when you cut it, the reaction still happens. And of course the curing time, so things are going to evaporate, whereas with balms and skincare products, you incorporate it at a lower temperature, and as you pour it, it cools off rather rapidly, and that's it. There's no reaction with it. So I did reduce it to 1%, just to be on the safe side. And what I ended up doing is I added 1% Litsea, or Chang. And it's got a really nice lemony smell. It's actually very, very similar to Lemon Myrtle. It smells great. And it actually, now that I'm smelling it, I wouldn't even know there's Litsea in it, really, to be honest. And that's just to help with the dermal limit and to keep that nice lemon zest smell. And of course, the 2% patchouli in here and the 0.5% cedarwood as well. Just to help that patchouli along a little bit. Not that it really needs it, but I like to add it anyway. So color wise, I am doing an equal split, and I'm also doing something a little bit different for the color. So half of it will be yellow Australian clay, and the other half will be, well, this part's what's a little different than what I normally do. Usually I do all pink clay with a bit of Reef red clay, but I wanted to just be a little bit lighter. So I added on the bottom, I don't know if you can see it, probably the light's too bright, but it's white clay and pink clay with Reef red clay. So I just want it to be a really soft red. So I'm hoping that will turn out the way I want it to turn out. I'm sure it'll be fine either way, it's fine. And in here, of course, is just a cocoa olive recipe, and I add 1% oat in here, oats, and I will use the stick blender before I add the lye to the oils, and I'll just make sure it's all well incorporated and blended, and it kind of makes it more fine when you stick blend it in first, and because I don't want it to be too harsh on the skin, I want it to be gentle. So it's 30% virgin coconut oil, which I have changed back to virgin coconut oil, because I just found, and it's just me, I'm sure, but my skin is extremely sensitive, and small changes in soap using ingredients, I feel it. I can feel the difference. So using refined organic coconut oil versus virgin coconut oil, I actually notice the difference. And I have reduced the citric acid, so I was doing 2%, but now for the body, I just leave it at 1%. And for cleaning, I do 3%, or what I've been playing around with lately, also the cleaning bars, I've been using 5% citric acid, and so far it's actually been really well. I have another video waiting to be edited where I've actually tested that out, and it's actually quite good. I didn't have any problems with tracing or cutting or molding, and no crystals formed, because crystals can form in citric acid when you use it above 2%, but I had none of that. So I found, just for me, but I'm paranoid, and because I sell my soaps as well, I found that 2% citric acid I just felt like the soap wasn't as conditioning, because it's cleaning a lot better because of the hard minerals in water. And I found when I went down to 1%, I didn't have that issue with my skin. It just felt beautiful, but I didn't have soap scum issues. So I think 1% is really good. I mean, it depends on your hard water level. If you have really hard water, then you would want to use 2 and 3%. But it's all trial and error. You've got to try and see what works for you and your skin and your home. And it varies by area and suburb as well, and by city, of course. And certain areas, even a few suburbs away, can have harder water than your area because of the piping. Just depends on how old the piping is in your actual suburb. That can have a big impact on the quality of water that comes out of your tap when you're obviously having a shower. So that was my reasoning going down to 1% citric acid. And actually, I thought it was just me being paranoid about citric acid, but Ellie, as you know, Ellie's from Ellie Every Day, she actually mentioned that, and I thought it was in my head originally, moving from 2 to 1% citric acid, but she said that 2% citric acid, it seemed to be not as conditioning on her skin. And I know Ellie's skin and my skin are really similar, they're actually quite sensitive. And she actually had the same experience, and I didn't tell her about my experience with that. She tried citric acid because she was just curious to see the difference. And she actually just, came back to me and said, hey, it was great using it and all, but it was not as conditioning. I found it a little, just on the more drying a little bit. Not like overly, but like her skin and my skin and other people's skin are really sensitive. Small changes you can really notice. So again, the recipe before, I was using 2% citric acid. I was using refined organic coconut oil, which is fantastic. There is absolutely nothing wrong with RBD or refined coconut oil. And I was using virgin olive oil. So all these things, most people won't realise, but for me, I realise, and because I sell my soaps, I'm like, no, I want my soaps to be top quality, absolutely top quality. So I'll switch back to virgin coconut oil. I'm going to stick with refined for cleaning and melt and pour and liquid soaps. It's totally fine. But for my luxury bar soaps, I'm going to be using virgin. And of course, extra virgin Australian olive oil. And I just find now that I've done those 3 changes back to kind of how I was making soap before the last 6 months or 6 to 12 months before I introduced those changes. Now that I went back to my original recipe, I find it just absolutely beautiful on the skin. It's just so conditioning, and it really, really does make a difference with what you're putting into your recipe. So I just thought I would share that because that's just from my experience, and my mum had the same experience too. She's got really sensitive skin like I do. So me, my mum and Ellie both had that same experience with citric acid, and my mum, because I don't think Ellie's used my soap for the last 6 months, I don't believe. With the newer, obviously I'm always turning over soaps, but the ones that I use virgin and refined coconut oil, my mum, obviously, because we live together, she said that it was drying her skin out a little. So I think there's definitely something to when you're using quality oils, and it really does make a difference in the finished product. So yeah, I thought I'll just share that interesting experience that I've been faced with the last few months. So I went ahead and bought quite a lot of virgin coconut oil, and since doing that, just perfect. Beautiful, excellent. Right, so that's 30% virgin coconut oil, 70% Australian cold pressed extra virgin olive oil with 3% coconut milk powder. I want to use my coconut milk powder up because I've got still about maybe a couple of 100 grams left, so I wanted to use that up. I'll probably have enough for another batch of cocoa olive or whatever I decide to slab up. And of course, my lime water, 25% water to oil, and it's got 1% citric acid, and I reduced from 3% to 2% raw sugar. And the reason why I found, not that there's anything wrong with using 3%, the only reason why I reduced it to 2% from 3 is it caramelizes a little bit because it gets quite hot, and absolutely nothing wrong with it. If it caramelizes and your lime water goes really dark, it's still perfectly fine to use. The only thing is with coloring. It can affect the color. And of course, as you can see in my essential oil blend, it's very, very dark. Plus, if the lime water is extra dark as well, it's going to affect the coloring. So that was my reasoning from going to 3 to 2%. I haven't really noticed much of a conditioning or other difference whatsoever. And you know how I said, I noticed some very small changes. So that change I didn't notice, but the change, or the olive oil, the coconut oil, and the citric acid percentage, I did notice a difference. So I'm really happy with finding my new, I guess, what's that word? I found a nice happy medium now. So I'm not going to change this recipe, I'm just going to leave it the way it is. Just like how I always say, don't fix what ain't broke. So I'm not going to change this recipe at all, I'm just going to leave it. And I just find it absolute perfection on the skin. So yes, ranting, I know, apologies. So 2% raw sugar, 1% citric acid, 1.2% each of sodium lactate and pink Himalayan salt. You can use sea salt or plain salt, just as long as there's no anti-caking agents in it or other additives, because it can react with lye a little bit and it can make your batter a little, what's that word? Like not a smooth consistency when you go to pour it. It can be a little bit slushy, like kind of like ricing. So that's what the additives in salt can actually do. Anti-caking agents can behave in soap. So I've also got a mini question. So today I know I'm making lemon myrtle patchouli, but it's also a mini soap tech tutorial at the beginning, because I want to go over, because this is the question I get asked so many times. Why do I use both sodium lactate and salt? So I find when I was using sodium lactate on its own or salt on its own, even though it's great, fantastic, I just found that when I combine them, when I reduce the percentage a little bit for each, you can do between 1 and 1.5% each of sodium lactate and salt, as long as you're not using palm oil. And I found that it actually together just seemed to really create a much longer lasting bar, especially considering this is 70% olive oil. And another question I get is, wow, how come your soaps last a lot longer? Mine just melt away because of the high olive oil content. And I'll put it down to really big water discounting, so it gets harder quicker. And I don't think if you don't water discount enough with such a high olive oil content, when you go to use that up 4 to 6 weeks after curing, it's still not really fully cured. So it's really important to water discount. I use 25% water to oil ratio. That's kind of how I do my water, and that really helps a lot. At 4 weeks, the bars are just nice and hard. And of course, with the salt and sodium lactate, I find even after a few days, when I pick the bar up and I go to knock it, it's like a rock. And that's what you want. So you want less water to use both salt and sodium lactate, because together they seem to create a really hard bar. And well, I can't say like really hard, but a lot harder, like compared to palm oil recipes. And because I have been using palm oil for private labels, those bars are really solid. So I don't add salt to those. I add just a little bit of sodium lactate to them, but I don't add salt because it really doesn't need it. I add the sodium lactate to help unmold from the silicone molds with a slab or those logs. So that's the only reason why I use sodium lactate when I have palm oil. But for high olive oil content, they really go a long way. They're very inexpensive as well. So if you are selling soap, there's really no excuse for you not to use salt and sodium lactate. Only because you're selling it for money and you want people to get your soap and have a good amount of uses from it. If it's for home use, you don't have to use salt or sodium lactate. It's no big deal. You just use whatever you want, and doesn't matter. If it doesn't last as long and you're happy with that, that's just a personal preference. But for me, I like my soaps to last. And of course, especially for my customers, I like it to last. And sodium citrate is what citric acid turns to in your recipe when it reacts to the lye. And because it's sodium, anything with sodium in front of it, like sodium hydroxide, it's essentially a salt. Sodium lactate, sodium chloride, which is pink salt or sea salt or regular table salt, and sodium citrate, anything with sodium in front of it will add to hardness to your bar. So even sodium citrate will add longevity to your bar. Two ways: it increases the surface tension of the bar, and so of course you get a harder bar, and it makes it less reactive and less mushy to hard water. And when we go to put it on our skin as well, because our skin, have oils on it as well, it's got minerals, and obviously when we get dirty during the day, we have a lot of foreign substances on our skin, and that can also react to the bar that you're using and decrease longevity. So 1% citric acid really does make a huge difference in how your soap functions, and I just find 1% to be the sweet spot here in Australia anyway. So yes, I think that's pretty much it. I think I've covered everything, so hopefully I didn't bore you too much with a lot of info. But I've got to wait for this to cool, so let's check the temperature, 37, 48. I'll wait for the light to hit 35, and this will probably be 25, but by the time I combine it all, it'll be around the 30-degree mark, which is fine. It's not winter here anymore, it's the first day of spring, so coconut oil here was not so hard. It was actually quite mushy when I went to take it out. If it was winter, then I would soap a little bit hotter, but considering it's very nice weather at the moment. So I'm going to go step away, wait for these to cool down, and we're going to make some cocoa olive, coconut milk, lemon myrtle, Chang, patchouli and cedarwood soap. Oh, I'm sorry about that. One thing I forgot to show is I decorate the top of the soap with organic calendula petals. So I'll just leave that on the side. Always something. That's why I was thinking, gee, am I forgetting something? And I forgot the one thing about this bar that I use, and that's the calendula petals. So now we'll get to making the soap.